In today's demo, just to give you an overview of the demo, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the functionality. I'm going to walk through the dashboards and navigation. I'm then going to create a new product, add some requirements, create some releases, write a few test cases, run a few tests, and log a bug or two, and then go to reporting. So I've logged in. So the way SpiraTest is organized is in this main navigation bar at the top, that's where you have all the key information. So this icon on the top left, if you click on that, it takes you to this My page. That's your home page. It's a customizable dashboard. So you can go in here and you could say, well, I'm finished with starting my journey. Let me minimize that. That's your product homepage. And the reason why that's a hexagon is if you go to the main navigation, you will see we've actually got multiple different products. So in SpiraTest, you're typically going to be using it to test one or more systems. These are the different systems you're going to be testing. Each one is going to be a separate product in Spira, and we can group them under a program, which is a collection of products. So the fact that these are the icon for a product is a hexagon, the icon for a program is 3 hexagons. Products also use a template. Templates are where all the configuration and customization lives. So you can have one template that multiple different products will use, and that has this icon here. So now that you understand the different workspaces, if I click on a hexagon, that's the icon for a product. That's going to take me to the product homepage. So this is the homepage for a single product or project. And as you can see, it shows me all the information across the different parts of the system that are important for me. I can see any open issues. I can see my requirements percentage completion. I can see my requirements test coverage. I can see my defect metrics, how many bugs are open, what's the distribution of bugs. I can see my burn down charts, burn up, I can see my schedule. And you're probably thinking like, well, these seem like general project metrics, but I want some testing metrics. And there are some testing metrics here, but don't worry, there is a focused testing version of the dashboard where we put all the testing widgets on by default. And that's where all the QA metrics are right here: requirements coverage, test status, progress over time. You can see the test status by release, by version, by sprint. All of that's available right here. And this is your QA dashboard. So just to recap, you've got the main navigation where you can choose your different products, got the product homepage. Within each product, we have the artifacts menu, and that's where you can see all the functionality you have. We're going to create a brand new product and create some requirements. We're going to add some releases. We're going to add some test cases and run a few. We're going to log a few defects, and then we're going to go to reporting. So let's go ahead and create a new product. To do that, you go to the administration menu. This is the admin menu. The admin menu is broken into 3 sections. This is my product level administration. This is my template level administration. The middle and the bottom is my system administration. Now, to create a new product, there is a system admin function. So I'll go there. I'm going to create a new product. Adams AM demo product. And then here I would describe what the system is supposed to do. I'm not going to bother. And it's a new product. It's not based on an existing one. And what's the template I want to use? Now, I can use an existing template. I can also create a new template. Hit insert. It's now creating my product. And there we go. That's my new product. And my membership is right here. So who's a member of this product? Well, just me, which isn't very useful. Really, I want other people to be a member of this new product. So I don't need to be a sysadmin to do this. The product admin can do this because it's related to just this one product. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to add additional people. So now I've added some people. They're members of the project or product. So that's good. That's actually all I have to do. I can go straight here into requirements and I can start using the product. And so for today's demonstration, let's pick a industry. Let's imagine we're going to be building a new restaurant comparison application. So I'm going to create some user stories for that. So let's go ahead and do that first. So I'm just going to create some requirements. Now, depending on the methodology, you might call them requirements, you might call them user stories. That's really up to you. The types of requirements that you have are all customizable depending on your methodology. If you're doing an agile, typically you'd call them user stories. We're just going to call them, product requirements for right now. Okay, great. Now, I would like to know what version these are going to come in. That's a good idea too from a planning standpoint. And then for testing, so I'm just going to make it very simple. I'm not going to worry about sprints and a bit more detail. I'm just going to create 2 versions, release 1.0 and release 2.0. Now, and you might say, well, I really want to do some more advanced backlog planning. I'd like to have a nice board. If you want some of that functionality, boards and planning, that's in SpiraTeam. In the case of SpiraTest, we are assuming that this stuff is being done somewhere else. And you can do some basic story management and basic release management, but the more sophisticated functionality is in our SpiraTeam product. So then you might say, well, these requirements that have come in, what if I'm using Jira or Azure DevOps? Where do they come from? Well, the great news is our integration with Azure DevOps and Jira and other tools automatically brings in requirements from those tools. So these requirements will either be manually entered like I just did, or input from a spreadsheet, or from a tool like TestRail, or they can be synchronized with tools like Jira. So there's lots of options. Once you've got your requirements in, and then you have your releases. I just created 2 releases. The next thing we might want to do is just say, well, guess what? Which of these requirements is going to be in which release, and how important are they? And I can go ahead and do that here. So I can either do it on this page in bulk, or I could click on one of these items and I can do it on what's called the detail page. The detail page is where you see the workflow of the requirement. You can also see the test coverage. There aren't any tests right now. You can also see the history of any changes that are made. So there's a full audit trail of every change made in the system. And here you can see is where I change the type of that requirement. So let's go ahead though, and we're just going to assign this to a release. So we'll say that this is a really important functionality. It's in the first version. It's in our MVP. Its priority is high. We haven't defined any components, so that's empty. We could define components too. And the next one is inviting friends. Let's say that's going to be the next version. That's not in our MVP. It's high, but maybe it's medium. And then the next one is the searching, and that also is in the next release. That's also medium, so like that. So very easy to navigate, very easy. Look how fast that is to load. Super easy, super quick. Go back to my requirements list. Now I've got a prioritized list of requirements, and I've also got them tied to a specific release. So from a requirements management, I'm in a good place. Now, what about testing? Well, how do I test these? So at the simplest level, I could go into test cases right here and say, well, let me create some test cases. I could go in here and say add test case. That's a good idea, but it'd be much easier if I could do that automatically from my requirements, right? I've already got some starting points. So I can do that. So if you go in here, I can simply go check, 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 and go tools, create test cases. It's now created one test case for each of these particular requirements. It's done for me. If I hit refresh, you'll see you've now gone from not covered to these bars. And if I go over to my test case model, you'll see I've got 3 different test cases. It's taken the name of the user story or requirement, and it's prefixed it with the word verify, and it's made it a test case, and it's linked them. So it makes it really quick. Now, for those who are saying, well, that's pretty cool. What if I wanted more detailed test cases? Now, we do have a new feature we released, which is not for today's demo, but with our ChatGPT OpenAI integration, you can actually now also have AI generate multiple test cases for you as well. So if I take a requirement, the AI can actually generate 10 different test cases for each one. So we've got some more sophisticated options for auto generation of test cases. But from a basic functionality, even without AI, we've got that automation in place where you can create a single test case for every requirement. But I want to categorize these. These are really functional tests. They tie back to each of the requirements individually. So let's create a new folder, which I'm going to call functional tests. And I'll put these in there. So if I want to create a new folder, it's really easy. Just add a folder. And I want to drag them into the folder. So I'll put those into the folder. They're in the folder. Very nice. And now I want to maybe create a regression test end-to-end functionality. Okay, so I'll create a new folder called regression tests. Okay, I'll create that. And in that one, I'm going to go and use the functionality natively in the test module to create a test case. So whereas before I created it from the requirement, now I'm going to create it just directly in the test case module. So I'll create a test case, which will be end-to-end regression test. Now, in real life, you'd probably give it more information than that, but that's good enough for the demo. So I've now got a end-to-end regression test, and I've got 3 functional tests tied to each of my 3 user stories. So what do I do next? Well, I've got tests. I could run them, but if I click on one, when I click on one, I'm going to notice that the test is quite basic. It literally says, as a user, I want to be able to enter a cuisine and find a restaurant, and the step pretty much says the same thing. Now, for some early stage MVPs, this might be sufficient. If you've got very skilled testers and you're doing exploratory testing, you can make this test an exploratory test, and you can run it right now, and you can actually add the steps as we go. So you could go in here and say, you know what, we don't have a test defined yet because this is brand new functionality. Let's go ahead and run it as is. So let me show you that way, which is we go in here and we execute it as exploratory. And I'm going to choose release 1. This is the first version, hit next. And in my exploratory mode, I can literally write my tests from scratch. So I actually, well, let's pretend I haven't got a real application, so we're going to have to use a bit of our imagination. I'm going to create, do something, and I'm going to find a restaurant. So let's think the first thing I'd want to do would be to, choose a cuisine from a list of options. And the expected result would be the list displays and includes certain expected, types of food. And we'll put some of it later. Actual result would be, and this is, I'm testing as I'm doing this, so it's exploratory testing. So the actual result was the list was displayed, looks good. So I can do this where I'm literally writing my test as I'm doing it. So I add a step and say, okay, next thing would be click on the list on the dietary restrictions that I care about, gluten-free, kosher, halal, whatever it is that makes sense. Expected result, the list of the options cover what I need. And the actual result was, the list contained kosher, halal, and gluten-free. Maybe that's all I wanted. That's good. Okay, create another step. And as I'm doing this, I can also pass the steps as I'm doing it. So I'm testing and writing it. So this is exploratory testing. And we'll do one more, which is click on the search button. The expected result was the list of restaurants in 5 miles that match is displayed. And maybe we didn't get we got an actual result that was wrong. We got an actual result that said the list displayed no results. So with exploratory testing, you might be putting in data and writing a test simultaneously. So this is the most free-form way you can do it, which is write the test, run the test all at once, fully exploratory, and you can capture things like a screenshot. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to capture, pretend this is a screenshot of the app. It's obviously just a web page. I'll put that in there. There we go. So you can paste in what happened, and we can even log a defect. Now, because this is not yet, finished functionality, it's evolving, we may not want to log a defect yet. We might just want to log a failure. So we do that. So now I've finished my exploratory test, hit fail. Now I can update the test case with my new information as opposed to just finishing. And because this is an exploratory test, that makes sense. So I'll do that. So what I've done is I've just taken a one-line test. I've turned it from an exploratory test of one line into an actual test result. And I've also taken the test and built out my steps, which is great. So I've now got a test case that is ready for it to be tested non-exploratory. So I can now switch the type from exploratory to regular to functional, say, and now when I do that, it's going to be run and the person won't be able to change the steps. So we have this exploratory mode, which is completely free form. You're writing and running simultaneously. And we've got more of a traditional test where it's a scripted test that someone's going to follow, and one can switch from one to the other. So that's really cool. Now, how would I create a regular test case from scratch if I wasn't doing it in exploratory mode? So let's take the next one. This is the case I want to invite friends to collaborate on a search to find restaurants that we all agree on. Okay, well, so to change the test case, normally you don't usually run it at all. You can use the edit functionality. So I've got this default step that's in here. I can either remove that or edit that. I'll just edit it and then add a new one. So the first step would be, I'm now writing this test case more as a traditional test case. You can use BDD syntax or regular syntax. As a user, I want to invite friends to collaborate in a search. So the first thing you would do would be, click on link to find friends. Hopefully you have friends. Expect result, the user search appears. The next one would be enter in a friend's name. The user match is displayed. And the last step would be select one or more friend and invite to group. The request is created and users notified. A very simple test, 3 steps. Now, that's great. So I've got my test case now. I've got one test case that was written from an exploratory session that I've turned into a test, one that I've just written normally. Now, one thing you may notice is I haven't logged into this application. Authentication has not been done. So how do I do that? Well, I could go to this and simply say add step, add a login step. But I don't want to do that because that's going to mean having to go into both of these and add the same step, which is kind of annoying. And if I change my login screen, I got to go search and replace every place and change it. So one of the things we have in Spira is the ability to create basically reusable test components. So if I wanted to create a new test, I'm going to put in the root folder. I can create a new test called login. So let's do that. We'll call that login to system. And I'm going to then reuse that test in my other tests. So I'll create login to system. And I want to obviously have these users log in as different people. So I'm going to create some input parameters. So I'll just create, for simplicity, username and password. Hit save. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to write a simple login step, which would be click on login button. The login window is displayed. Save that. And we're going to hit another step, which would be enter login and password and click submit. The user is logged in as the expected behavior. And we won't worry about the exception cases just again for today. And I'll put the sample data in here. I want a bulleted list, bullets, and I'll say username. And I'm going to put my parameter in. So I'll grab that, drag it over here, and I'm going to put username there. Password, I'll put there, right there. Okay, save, done. I've now got a login test case. So now if I go back to my two functional tests, I can now insert this login step right here as the first one. So I go in here and say, insert link, and I go to functional test, as it's in there, and I'm going to put login would be, user, change me, do the same thing for the next test. And now I don't have to have those same steps duplicated. So if I have to change my login page, I don't have to go in and do that multiple times. I can change my login page in one place and they'll both pick up the change. And you can even change the login and password they're using. So I've now got a reusable component included in my test. And you can do this multiple levels. So I've now got two test cases using a common component. I can now do my testing. So let's go ahead and test them. So to do the testing, you can either run them individually or you can create what's called a test set. That's like a test suite. Let's go ahead and create a new one. And we'll call this testing of MVP. And we're testing release 1. So we'll say that. And I'm going to assign it to myself. And it's not started. That's right. I'm going to click on that. And then let's go ahead and add me to the test. So let me add the test cases. So I'm going to grab my functional tests. I'm going to grab all three of these. And I'm also going to add my regression test, which is the one I created separately. Add that. So I've now got 4 test cases. And that's the right order. If you want to change the order, you can always drag and drop to move them around. But that actually is the right order. So I'm just going to leave it as is. And I will assign it to myself. That's good. So I'm ready to test. So if I hit the execute button, or if I go now, normally in real life, I wouldn't hit execute here. I would go back to my page, and I would see under my assigned test sets, my testing. So, and I get an email notification as well. But let's go ahead and run it from here like a real user would. And I'm going to run my test. The release is chosen because it was in the test set. The builds are empty because we haven't hooked this up to a CI tool. If you connect this to your CI tool, you have that option. We haven't defined any test run tag. We can add test run tags if we want. And so now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to run my test. So let's go ahead and run my test. Click on my login button, pretend that worked. That worked. Choose a consumer from a list of options. Click on the dietary restrictions. And now let's pretend this did actually work. So that's great. Get the search button, great. And now I go to the next one, which is inviting friends. Click the login button, log in, it works. And now we get to the link to find friends. Say that when we go in that link, it throws an error. So we get an actual result of a missing page error, a 404. No one likes a 404. There's a 404. I'm just going to grab a print screen of that page. We'll dump that in there. And now we want to log a defect because this is now in production or it's in development. It's ready to be logging defects. When we're exploratory testing, we might decide just to have a failure, not log a defect. Let's go ahead and log a defect though, because this should work by now. It's a bug. These types are all customizable. If you are connecting to ADO or Jira, they will match the ones in Jira, and then we synchronize those values over. We also will synchronize over to Jira things like labels and tags, priorities, severities, components, and all that good stuff. Actually, this is pretty critical. I'm going to raise that up a bit. And we'll say, broken link on collaborate screens. And with that, we're going to hit a fail. We've now failed that defect and failed that test and logged a defect, which is great. Well, great for us in the demo, bad for the people building the system. And for right now, when we go to the next test case, we want to have a group of users to receive restaurant recommendations. Well, I can't do that because I've got no users, and I can't test this functionality because the previous failure is preventing me. So how do I record that? Well, that's where the blocked functionality comes in, because the reality is this, I don't know if this functionality works or not. I just can't use it yet because there's no users to use it with. So I'm going to say blocked by failure to add users. So it's an area of risk, which is that I can't test this part of the system. So we'll mark that as blocked. We also have a caution, which is a warning status. Okay, I've done my testing, so I'll go hit finish, right that. And if you go back, you can see because I have one test I didn't finish yet, it is warning me there's one still left to go, and I can hit this button. And if I want to resume it, you go to my pending test runs, and there you can see I've got one passed, one failed, one blocked, one not run yet. I can resume it by going here, or I can assign it to someone else if I'm not going to have time to finish it. So in real life, I want to come back here. I can resume it, and I guess what? I will just finish it off. Just to wrap this up, I'll just do a pass. And now I've passed it. I can now hit the finish button, and now I'm good to go. So I've done my testing. I'm finished as a tester. So if I go back to my test set, you'll see here, there's my status. If I go to my test set, I can drill down and see, look, these are my 4 tests. This first one is been passed, but if I click on it, I can drill down one level further and see, although this test case has passed, when it was first created, it did actually fail. So you can see the history. So even though it now passes, and that's the current status in this within the context of this release in this test set, there's always an audit trail of what happened. When I first did it during exploratory testing, you can see there was a failure, but now on the second go around, once we got it into the test set, that functionality was finished, and now it obviously passed. So you've always got that history. If I go to the other one that failed, which is the one that failed in the most recent release, which is it's this one here. If I click on this one, I click on the failed link, I can go straight to the test result, and you can see the first 2 steps passed. That was my login, the data that I used. There's my screenshot, and there's my log defect. If I click on the link, it takes us into the defect tracking of SpiraTest, which is right here. And I can now see the defect. And we have included the description of what failed, the expected result, the actual result, a screenshot, and the steps where it broke, how far I got. If you synchronize this to something like Jira, we're going to synchronize this over to Jira ADO, and you'll see it right there as well. And the attachment is right here, and that way it makes it really easy. And in real life, out of scope of today's demo, we could then assign this defect to someone. They could then work on fixing it, and then we could do a retest, and that would be great, hopefully. And so and we can even say how long we want to think it's going to take. And I'll just add a comment saying, Fred, please fix, like that. So there we go. So that's a little bit of how you do the triaging. One more thing just to mention before we wrap. If you go to requirements, you'll notice that even though I've created that project really quickly, I already have good test coverage metrics. I can go here and see, here's my requirements, and I can see that my first requirement under my finding a restaurant is tested, but I've got some major issues on the second part. The group management, there's a failure. I haven't been able to test the restaurant recommendations functionality because the failure is blocking me. So as a test manager, I want to get this test unblocked as quickly as possible. So my critical path is basically this failure here. And if you go to the dashboard that we first saw at the beginning, this is obviously now my new project, we can even see that the metrics are already starting to populate here as well. So even though we've only created a few test cases and one defect and a few requirements, we already have pretty good metrics to start with. And if you compare this with the project that I showed at the beginning, which is fully populated, you can see as you start to use the data, run the system, and add more test cases, the data just gets better and better. And you as the manager have no extra work to do. Your testers are working, doing their testing, developers are doing the developing and the fixing, BAs or people are doing all the requirements analysis. Everyone's working together. They might be doing it in different systems, but you have this single pane of glass where you can see the real-time status. And if you go to the reporting view, you can also drill down further, and you can do things like picking different fields and creating more customized graphs and charts if you want to be able to slice and dice the data a little bit differently. I want to look at the different requirements by priority and see how they compare. I want to look at the testing and see maybe is it varying by the tester, or is it varying by the component I'm working on, or a custom field, or anything, or the priority of the test case. So you've got lots of different ways of slicing and dicing the data, and you can export these graphs and charts as data. You can also run reports and create documents and other things as well. A lot more to show. That's a really quick overview of creating a product, running an exploratory test, writing a regular test, running both, logging results, creating a defect, and seeing it all come together.